Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we get to hang out with homeopath and astrologer Liz Norman. First time on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, hi, thank you.
We've had a few of your buddies on the show, Camilla Scherer and Jeremy Scherer, who you have actually been, well, you've been like their right-hand woman for, did you say like 18 years or something? You've worked
Actually,
with
you know what?
Jeremy?
It'll be 20 years next year.
No.
Wow, yeah.
How did you even like, I've never asked you this, but how did that even come about that you started
Yeah,
working with?
it was one of those really weird serendipity moments. It was kind of, I'd gone to study at Misha's college when it was the School of Homeopathy was still Misha down in Devon.
Mm.
And I lived near Malvern, which is where they were in Worcestershire. And I'd not long moved there. And so I took my kids, who were really little then, to Camilla. And I just wanted to do something to support my studies. And so I reached out to them and said, can I do some kind of help you at your clinic? And I helped to reorganize the pharmacy because I'm really efficient and good at organizing. And just at that moment, a few weeks, months later, their current PA that they had then left. And it was kind of like, would you like a job? And that was back in 2005. So here we are heading for 20 years.
Wow. Well, I see all the things that you do for them, and I know that they will agree that they can't do what they do without you. So I
Yeah,
actually just got to.
for anybody that does astrology out of there, I have strong Virgo in my chart. So really efficient, really good at planning. And I call myself the proverbial WD-40. I keep everything oiled.
I have one of those in my clinic. She's called Amy, and I couldn't do what I do without her, which is amazing. And we've also had the lovely Janie Lavelle on the show, who's a friend and colleague of yours and of mine. And she has been telling me for ages, go see Liz, go get your chart done through Liz. And I'm like, okay. And then I had came at like a bit of a crossroads, and I had my chart done with you, and I'm so grateful. And we'll touch on that soon. But before we get into all of that, do you want to tell us your journey of how you first discovered homeopathy?
Yeah, so the homeopathy was, I was always interested, like most of us, the call is they're younger, there's an interest, but we do normal things in our lives. So homeopathy was the kids. You know, my eldest is now 31, but he got sick, he got the ear infections, and I just said there has to be another way. And I looked at various things, and as soon as I found homeopathy, it resonated. And I made the decision to leave the corporate world and retrain. And so that was interesting because it took all my focus and energy into learning and doing homeopathy. So that's when astrology took a real back burner, and it was just the kind of the hobby in the background, and my work became homeopathy, and then I went on to study it, etc. So that's been through the children, and it's still our family's first choice. I still practice with homeopathy, but obviously now my main focus is astrology.
So you were doing the astrology before the homeopathy.
So I was a kind of a lay astrologer, reading, doing stuff behind the scenes, but it actually wasn't until 2019 that I went, you know what, I need to actually do this properly. I need to actually go study properly. And the amazing thing was, it was literally that final piece of the jigsaw. It took everything I'd done and it just glued everything together, because it's the same language as homeopathic philosophy. So I think when homeopaths come to astrology, there's a real sense of, I'm at home. I get this because it's the language we already speak. It just adds a whole nother layer to it. So I super accelerated my studies because it was just easy. And so that's where I've then got to the point where I merge the two. And I would say, well, now how I practice is through astrology first.
Mm.
Then I will support with remedies.
There's a few homeopaths that have managed to really successfully do that, and Gabriel Blass and Eileen Noman and Peter Berryman. I think I also do the two of them. And I've always been scared of even like going down the rabbit hole of astrology because it's always seemed overwhelming. And I've had my natal chart, I don't think officially done, but like a couple of people that know a bit about astrology have said things to me, and it was overwhelmingly confusing. And what I really loved about my consult with you is that you explained it in such simple terms that I could actually understand what my chart meant. And I came to you with some family lineage stuff that was going on that I was like wondering, is that something that's, reflected in me? And when you were showing me my chart and you explained how it all, and there's actually this big water element, which is to do with intuition and things like that, that actually I'm just feeling all this other stuff that's been handed down rather than actually like, living it. The piece that brought me was so profound. And it meant that I could put that behind me and just move on with my life instead of that churning away in the back of my head and eating away at me the whole time. So you gave me this real, like it was just like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Oh, okay, that's why I'm feeling this, because actually there's all this water everywhere in my sinus. So I'm feeling a lot of things instead of that
Yeah.
actually being
And
me.
trusting your intuition, which, because
Mm,
we do, but it's almost like I'm showing you how strong that is. That's
mm,
what I love about the chart, because it's deeply spiritual, it's deeply intuitive astrology, as is homeopathy as a healing art, but they both are very grounded. In homeopathy, we go back to the repertory, we go back to the provings, we repertorize, we do the work. And in astrology, we go back to the chart and we nuance, and we're finding almost evidence in the chart. It's not
mm.
pure energy healing. And that's what appeals to me, is that it's literally there in black and white.
Mm. And it's such a beautiful way to find if somebody is in alignment or not. Because and it was a while ago that we did this now, but I know there was like all sorts of things around Mercury, which is to do with communication, apparently. And you were saying that this and this aligns, and that's why you're doing the podcast, and that's the way that you're getting a message out there. And it's actually, it felt to me like the thing that's in my natal chart is what I'm doing at the moment. And that
Yeah.
made me feel in alignment. I've already felt that, but that was just nice having that confirmation, which
Yeah, yeah,
was really
absolutely.
lovely.
I mean, there's two big words that I use all the time: validate, because when we look at the chart, it's a blueprint of the energy of the universe that we brought
Mm,
with us. We've taken a snapshot of the dance of the planets, where they all are at that precise moment in time. And just like we carry biochemical DNA, we carry energetic energy, and that's written in the stars. And if we understand that energy and we become more aligned with it, very homeopathic, we work with it, we understand that's the energy, then we actually feel more aligned. And so it validates our gifts. Mercury was so strong in your chart. I remember kept saying, of course you need to be doing this. It's literally written in the stars, which is beautiful. So we stand a little taller and think, yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But more profound is where someone's challenged by something, and it's so easy these days. We look at social media, we look at, and why does everybody find that really easy? Why am I the only person that struggles with this? And when you mirror that in the chart and you say, okay, maybe you do struggle with, say, learning, and the person validates, okay, I don't find it as easy as someone else. They forgive themselves, and then the medicine is in the chart. We can find another way in. And that's where we then empower. And that's the bit I really love, actually, more than the, hey, you're really good at that, because that kind of self-forgiveness is really empowering as well. And it goes directly, can go into then finding remedies to support somebody in that process.
It's easy for somebody to think that you're psychic. Do you get people asking you that if you're psychic? Because the stuff that you can tell from somebody's chart is actually quite amazing. And like you
Yeah,
said,
and 100% not. Like, totally not. I can look at a chart and literally it's like practice. I will literally look at a chart and I will join this with this, and this rules this, and this is this. And I will get to that totality very quickly. When I first studied, I didn't. But no, there is no psychic at all. It's grounded, it's joining dots, it's pattern recognition, which is very similar to taking a case. The only thing I would say is that oftentimes in someone's notes or talking to them, there'll be a theme that comes up, and then I might be going and adding in extra things to the chart. And I do seem to intuitively know, oh, go look at this asteroid or go look at that. But it's actually very grounded. And you
mm,
know what? I'd like to take back to anyone that's listening here who wants to dip their toe in the water with it. It's actually quite simple. it shouldn't be overwhelming. And any astrologer out there that kind of wants to shroud it with that, oh, nobody can do this, they're doing it a disservice, because it's a language and we can take baby steps into it and really understand that language. So when I read a chart for somebody, I say, this is your chart, you own it. I'm just translating it for you. And we literally take, this planet means this set of behaviors. Mercury, learning, speaking, communicating. And it sits in this zodiac sign, which means its energy expresses itself in these sorts of ways. If we just start with that, we're way ahead. And that's where it's a bit like giving somebody a 36C case and doing a first aid course. You can go into astrology at that level and it will be really powerful.
Yeah, that's the way that you explained that. Like, this is a sign, but it's in this house, and that's how it expresses itself. And then to what kind of like extent it does. That was so interesting, because I think I might have told you this story, but I became interested in astrology, but very basically as a little girl, because my mum said that she was bashing her head against the wall, not knowing what to do with me because I was so stubborn. And so she got a book on astrology and read up on Aries. And in that, it said that you have to explain to them why they have to do something. You can't just tell them to do something. You have to explain why, otherwise they won't do it. And so once she knew that, apparently that was revolutionary for her parenting, because she explained to me why I had to do stuff, and then she did it. But I have only ever been familiar with the sun sign. And then I heard that there's these other signs as well, which I had no idea about. And that's where you were really great with explaining that. So maybe do you want to tell our listeners about some of the other signs that are out there?
Yeah. It's the number one. You are more than your star sign or sun sign. That's when people will say, oh, I'm a Leo. And actually, oftentimes, your sun sign is not the most prominent that we're going to see. It's not the most prominent that you will resonate with. We work with, in traditional astrology, up to 10 planets. There are many more that we can work with. But if we just start with the sun and the moon, so each of those planets that we work with represents a set of archetypal behaviors, like a sub-personality, if you like. So the sun and the moon, they are who we are. And how they express themselves is in one of 12 zodiac signs. So a certain, is it fiery, go-getter, needs to do it their own way, Aries. It's my plan, and preferably I'm going to do it right now. And so
doesn't sound familiar at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
So we've got, we have the idea that if we were only our sun sign, we would be dividing the population into 12. As homeopaths, we know that's ridiculous. We work on individuality. So if we simply do the maths and say, you are more than just your sun, you are your sun and your moon, we do 12 times 12, 144. If you simply knew to look at somebody through the lens of their sun, their purpose, how they shine, what they're here to achieve and do, the sun, then their moon, which is their more emotional reaction, and one is in one sign and one might be in the same sign, but it could be in one of the others. So if we just understood that, we've now got 144 variants. And then we add on the ascendant, the rising sign, we've got all the other planets. So I think what's really useful, actually, is if we knew everybody's moon sign. I think the moon is, and it's very interesting in medical astrology, which I also practice, the moon is so important because the moon is the most individualizing of the planets. It moves quickest around the zodiac. So obviously we know the sun moves every day, doesn't it? So everybody born on the 11th of October will have the sun in the same place on that date, not massively individualizing. But the moon will move through a zodiac sign in 2.5 days. So it's moving very, very quickly around the zodiac. And the moon regulates, if we think the moon moves tides, doesn't it? The moon moves great bodies of water. We are made up of water. And so the moon in astrology governs the ebb and flow of our energy and the ebb and flow of our emotions. The water element is our emotional side. And it's really interesting. The moon will often be our quickest emotional reaction before the sun kicks in. If I said something to 5 people, how they react will be their moon. How they hear what I say, in part, will be their moon sign. So I think as a parent, it's a game changer to know where your child's moon is, because that's how they're going to perceive and emotionally receive what's being said to them. So again, as homeopaths, if we simply understood our patient's moon and sun, but the moon, it would really help us to just that little bit more awareness of our clients and what might be emotionally, because we know mental, emotional, physical, we know that so much of what's manifesting is coming from an emotional dis-ease.
That's why I love talking to you, because you have a way of explaining something which I always thought was just way out there topic, like way too hard to understand. And you break it down and make it usable, like for the average person to understand. I love what you just said about the moon and the ebb and flow of energy and the emotions. And that was something very useful that I got out of my consult with you, was when you were saying where in the moon cycle actually is my best energy, because I think that's where the moon was when I was born from memory. And you were saying that would be my most energetic time. So I've downloaded an app with the moon cycles, and I have started keeping an eye on when it is. I think it was in the new moon. And so just when that's happening, and then just because I'm still completely new to this and still learning as I'm going.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very, being practical is one of the things that makes me happy. Okay. I don't, so this is something anybody listening to this, they can go do this today. Okay. You don't even need to know that much about astrology. So if we look at the dance of the sun and the moon, why this is really important in medical astrology is the sun is our vital force, our battery pack. It's the kind of fire that keeps us going. How the energy of that sun is dissipated in our body is through the moon. The moon would represent our body and how the energy is utilized. So if we know that the moon obviously goes round the earth every 28, 29 days, we have at any point, the sun and the moon are dancing with each other. They will start together when the sun and the moon are next to each other and it's dark at the new moon. And then 14 days later, they're going to be opposite at the full moon. And you will then, as a person, depending on where you were born in that dance cycle, resonate with that energy. So if you were born when the sun and moon were together at a new moon, when the moon in the sky comes home to her new moon position, your energy will be at its highest. So you can go on a really good website to do that, is you can go to astroseek.com and just put in your date of birth and do moon calculator, and it will come up and it will show you, without you even needing to look at a chart, you were born on a first quarter moon or a waning gibbous moon or where it was. So then you can go track where the moon is and then just notice, do I have more energy when the moon has come back to that stage? But really importantly, when it's opposite it, do I notice my energy drop? Do I feel more drained or sensitive? Because I wonder if before I learned this, I'd go running to my homeopath and get a sledgehammer of a remedy, when actually we were just in the dark or the balsamic moon. And 2 or 3 days later, the crisis was no longer a crisis. So that's quite empowering to look at that. And another good hack with that is, if you're going to take a really big remedy, like a single 200 or a 1M or a 10M, take it at your moon phase return. Wait, because your body will receive it, your vital force will receive it most strongly. That's an amazing hack.
That is such a good hack. I love it. I love it. I have just been learning a bit more these days about taking remedies more intentionally. And at the Bali conference, there's different ways that you can receive a remedy. One of it was actually Declan Hammond putting a remedy in a sound bowl and then sounding the bowl and transmitting the remedy that way. And Janie gave me a really good idea of, when you're taking the 2 pillules, putting one on top of your tongue and one underneath your tongue, as above, so below. And so there's all this beautiful intention that we can use when we are taking these remedies, to take it more consciously and with that intention, which I really love. So now we can add this moon element into that as well, to just really just put that intention there. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I also love that you weave remedies into the consultation as well. So as we were doing the consult, you were saying, so because of this would be a good remedy for you to use, or because of this is a remedy that you can lean on. It feels really holistic that you can see so much with doing that astrological chart, and you can see where the person is stuck and things that they need to look out for and remedies that they can use. I know one of the things for me that you were saying, there was Jupiter was going over my chart until about the end of this year, and then things are going to lighten up. And absolutely, I think you were saying like mid-November-ish, but the thing that has been over my head for the last 4 years, actually, just today I got the text message that is about to be resolved. So hopefully by next
Wow.
week it'll be resolved. And also, we're going traveling for 6 months now in the caravan around Australia. So there's like, it's interesting the timing that you've mentioned, because I can already feel and see how that definitely relates. I've also been somebody who, because I think I'm actually quite skeptical by nature. And so when people talk about, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, this and that, I've always like poo-pooed all that. I'm like, whatever. It's just like, people that can't get their shit together that, like, but I have noticed now when people say it's Mercury retrograde, that I actually do have to be a little bit more careful with my communication. And when I'm sending things where previously, and now I don't know if it's because I'm conscious about it, that now I'm seeing it more, or if that.
Yeah, so I love that. So this is a really big thing, okay, that we can take the homeopathic principle of homeo, same, working with. Retrogrades are a massive thing in astrology where we can work with the energy. If we understand that a planet in the sky, now we're not talking now about your natal chart, your birth chart, we're talking about where planets are in the sky for all of us, okay? They're all moving around at any time. And sometimes, because of the apparent speed of the Earth and the speed of the other planets around the sun, their motion appears to be retrograde. Okay, obviously no planets actually go backwards, in case anybody thinks they're going retrograde. They don't. They appear to be slower than the movement of the Earth. And then the energy of that planet changes its quality. So Mercury is the planet that goes retrograde most often. It goes retrograde 3 times a year for about 3 weeks. Okay, so that's why everyone goes, scary, scary, Mercury retrograde. Other planets will go retrograde too. But what we get, let's take Mercury for an example. Mercury is thinking, learning, speaking, communicating. When it goes retrograde, all of those qualities take in a more introspective quality. They don't work like they normally work. So on a practical level, we can get miscommunication. If we try to be going at 100 miles an hour, Mercury's not, it's going slower. If 5 people called Sam and you're in a hurry and you press that message to go, you might go to the wrong person called Sam, because you're not honoring that Mercury is slower. We do the homeopathic thing, we work with it. We say, okay, we're going to be more mindful. I am going to check that I'm sending it to the right person. I'm also therefore mindful they may misunderstand what I've said. So the beauty is then that we think harder about how we express ourselves. And then if we get a message back, it triggers us. Instead of being triggered, we can do the big thing and say, actually, could you explain yourself? Because actually we have, I call them the C's, clear, concise communication. That's how we survive a Mercury retrograde. So that's a kind of a 3D level, but actually if we're really clever with it, we can say this is a powerful time to take our own thinking and be reflective. Great time to journal, great time to do talking therapies, Mercury, because retrogrades are all words rethink, review, reassess, revisit, remember. I think we all live life too fast, don't we? Life is one direction, 100 miles an hour. Retrogrades are the universe's way of saying, hang on a bit. And if we just stop and we go back, plan, it's a great time to plan, because then when we come out of the retrograde, we're back on track going in the right direction, 100 miles an hour. So that principle is the same for all planets that go retrograde. So this is being recorded. I know it will go out later, but this is in October. We have many planets retrograde at the moment. So this is a good time to be planning things, to be putting the flesh on the bones of what we're doing. And we then launch big projects when, depending on our own chart as well, when things are moving forward. So again, we can be really savvy and work with the energy.
I wish I could say that we were savvy with organizing our date for the Bali conference, but actually it was just because it was after my son's birthday, and that was the closest date this September. But after his birthday.
I did the chart for Bali.
I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Chart, wasn't it?
Because it was just after Mercury retrograde, and the way that Liz actually did the chart for us, which Janie then read out in Bali at the cacao ceremony, which added this extra special layer to the conference. But we didn't, that date was picked unconsciously, but it just happened to be a really good astrological date. Like, it literally could not have been any better date from what you were saying. But this is actually something that's really good to take into account. And you were saying sometimes it's not that great, because you were saying Jeremy is trying to launch another Dynamis, but astrologically you're telling him he needs to hold off.
Yeah, but again, really important to say, okay, astrology is only ever half the picture, okay? It's only ever half the picture. And anybody who tells you otherwise is, I don't know, that they're not doing astrology justice, because it's just a set of energies, okay? It's a set of energies. We then choose what we do with those energies. Yeah. So even if we all literally waited for all the planets to be going forward, we'd actually do nothing for about half the year. So, I mean, that's just not possible. And particularly the big outer planets, it's only really a thing when they change, when they start going retrograde. They're retrograde for months and months. So, yes, Mercury, don't launch anything during a Mercury retrograde unless you're prepared for it to go wrong.
And you have plenty of backups.
And you're actually happy to go on the ride with it. That's fine. You then find if you look at dates, you find sub dates, and it's only ever about working with the energy and understanding the quality of the energy, and then you don't get tripped up by it.
This is complete coincidence, but I guess it also is not, because everything happens as it should. But yesterday, as I was driving home, I was listening to a podcast episode with Dr. Robert Selig, who was a guest on Matt Blackburn's show called My Joe Life. I really enjoy his podcast. And I'm trying to get him to listen on the podcast. I can't imagine he's listening to this, but if he is, Matt, would love to have you on the podcast. But Dr. Robert Selig was talking about how there is a tissue salt for each sun sign, which I did know about. And I know Callie Foss was my one, which you brought up in the consultation as well. But then Dr. Roberts said something interesting about he was going in some other Saturn's thing. I don't know what it was, which had to do with breaking lots of bones. And he broke all these different bones, and he should have taken Calc Foss tissue salts, which was his tissue salt, but he didn't take it. And there's just so much to know when it comes to astrology and homeopathy. It's unbelievable. Do you use the tissue salt in that kind of way?
I do. And okay. So actually, in my own practice, I use tissue salts and I use batch flower remedies predominantly.
The batch flower related to this.
So both have direct
I didn't know
correlation. Okay, so both of them have direct correlations, and so there is a key tissue salt. There's a tissue salt for each of the 12 zodiac signs, and there is a key. If you work with the batch flowers, you have the healers, the 12 healers, and they are each assigned to one of the zodiac signs. And then there's lots that we use also around them. What's interesting is if you go read the books, they will say, particularly on the tissue salts, they'll say the tissue salt, for example, for Capricorn is Calc Foss. Medically, that makes sense because Capricorn is about structure, and in our body, our structure is our musculoskeletal system, our bones. So we can see there's a correlation. But what I found frustrating is that's not normal. If you've got somebody with their sun, as in they were born in December to January, in Capricorn, if their sun's super happy in their chart and everything's going fine in Capricorn, they don't necessarily need Calc Foss. you're actually more likely to be looking at someone's moon. So, number one, the first thing I would say is if you're going to go read a book and you go look at someone, there's loads of free software out there. You can run a chart. If you simply look at a chart and you look at where the sun is and where the moon is and nothing else, consider both. Okay, consider both, because if the sun is super happy, doesn't need that tissue salt. You'd literally be looking at the moon and then the rising sign or the ascendant. They are actually more key indicators in medical astrology than the sun would be.
Why do you think the moon has just been left behind and it's all about the sun?
So that's really interesting. If you go back to medieval Hellenistic astrology, the moon was really prominent. Okay, the moon was, and you would literally be, they would talk very much about whether you were a diurnal or a nocturnal birth. Were you born in the day or the night? Very strong. And it's actually the sun sign or star sign that was then popularized with kind of the newspaper type astrology. And we moved away from it. And if you go to Vedic astrology, it's all about the moon. So really interesting. If you take away nothing else from this and you looked at your chart on a free app somewhere, go look at your moon sign, because that's going to really unlock a real aha moment, I think, for a lot of people.
It's interesting because I think the sun represents masculine and the moon feminine. So even from that kind of point of view, I'm not surprised really that the moon kind of got left by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, we would be talking very, very symbolic yin and yang energy. And we need both. We need both energies. But the moon is definitely is how we use the energy that we have. And it's if we understand how to support our moon sign, we become more emotionally healthy. And if I'm looking at batch flowers or if I'm looking at tissue salts, number one, I'm looking at the moon. See where the moon is, see what the moon is doing.
So if somebody is born via like a planned C-section, or even an emergency C-section or anything like that, does that have an effect on the date that they were supposed to be born, or is it just whatever day they're born? That's
a super question. And it kind of goes to the slightly bigger picture of this, which is everybody's birth chart is unique. Everybody's birth chart is different. And obviously we've been talking so far about planets and how they move. And obviously everybody born on the same calendar day is going to have their sun at a similar degree in the zodiac. The moon's going to move faster. But what we do is we take this idea of the as above, where are the planets, and we overlay that picture onto the Earth, which is moving very fast on its own axis. And we imagine you've taken a picture of the heavens and you're wrapping it around the moving Earth that's spinning. And we're anchoring that picture. This is where it falls on Earth. And this is where we get what we call the homeopathic, the astrological houses and angles. So if you've ever heard of the ascendant or rising sign, that's the Earth spinning, and we have the horizon line of sunrise to sunset, and we're anchoring that picture of where the planets were onto the spinning Earth. And that spin moves a whole rotation every 24 hours. So that rising sign or ascendant will move 1 degree every 4 minutes. So we do need an accurate time of birth to have an accurate ascendant. Long way of getting back to your question. One of the reasons why twins will often have different charts, they can very easily have a different ascendant, because unless they were literally a C-section born at the same time, if they were born naturally, even being born 15 minutes later would potentially change the ascendant sign. So if we then go back to your question of even an emergency C-section or planned, if it was planned, it might not happen at 10 a.m., mightn't it? It might happen at 9:45, or it might get bumped back to 11 or 12. That's going to change your ascendant sign. So even the planned C-section, how that clock face looks and the ascendant, and therefore the houses that the planets end up in. And the houses are the area of life that the energy gets to show up in most easily. So that for example, let's take your sun, okay? Because your sun is how you shine. So if your sun is in the third house, that would be the house of communication and learning. So that would be somebody who would find learning easy. They would enjoy learning, potentially. Depends on the rest of the chart. Somebody who would then maybe be really good at working in media, third house, communicate. Their sun gets to shine doing third house stuff. If their sun, say, for example, was in the seventh house of relationships, their relationships, be that partners, very close friends, business partners, would be the key focus of that energy. And where that clock face changes, moves. So that's super individualizing. And I'm honestly, the nuance of even half an hour will change that.
Wow. And now when you do a consult, you always start with a chart, hey? I mean, it would make sense.
So actually, when I do a consult, I remember, okay, that we're talking about possibilities of energy. We have planets, which are archetypal behaviors. How they express themselves is through the lens of a sign. And that sign also has a range of behaviors. All of these ranges are good, neutral, or challenging. So when somebody comes to see me and they are an adult and they've lived their lives, they've already lived a number of those possibilities. So I always ask people to send in a questionnaire. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your life. Tell me where you are. Tell me what you want guidance on and about yourself, because then I know how they've been expressing those possibilities of energy up to now. And then I can dive straight in and say, okay, I'm going to validate where this is. How about we look at the medicine and we move forward? So I definitely don't do the whole, I want to show how clever I am and tell you stuff about you. No, you know about you. I want to meet you where you are. So actually, I tend to therefore be able to do much more in my first consult than other astrologers who go in blind. And it helps with remedies as well.
Yeah, I found that part really therapeutic, actually, like writing down my little story. And you gave very few kind of guidelines, like just like little rough guidelines. And then I just wrote it all down on a Word doc. And I thought, poor Liz, she can just make from this what she likes, reading this crazy story of mine.
What's really lovely, what I do is I actually get the notes that people send me, and sometimes people send me pages and already you're getting a flavour, aren't you, of who the person
exactly.
is. And I get them and I highlight them, and then I go look at the chart and oh my God, I can't tell you how my heart sings when I do that, because I've read, it's not, as you say, it's quite loose what I ask people to say, and and then I get a real flavour of who they are, where they are, and then I look at the chart. And it's like literally, if I could have £10 for every time I say, you can't make this stuff up. And I love it because it's like, I'm then like, okay, I'm there and I've got a mirror. I'm mirroring their chart with their life. And that's all we're doing, is we're looking at a mirror of the highest version of who we are.
Now, I know that every single person, because already I'm thinking, do you see children as well? Because I really need to have my 2 children's charts read as well, so I can see how to, be a better parent to them. But I'm sure every single person listening to this right now is wanting to book a consult with you straight away, and you're only one person. But luckily, you have got a course coming up so that we can be empowered to learn from you and all these decades of experience that you have. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, right from the get-go, when I started studying, I was going, wow, this links to homeopathy. Wow, this links to homeopathy. And I was like, they are, they speak the same language. The homeopathic philosophy, individuality, totality. We're looking at the total chart. We're standing back. We're looking at the moon, the ascendant, moving very fast with the individuality. And so I was building this repertoire, if you like, of things that are useful for homeopaths. And it really struck me that I did a lot. I still study all the time. Study is really important for me. I'm always on at least 2 courses at any one time, which is part of my chart. I have a Gemini moon, so it's cool for me to keep learning. But I wanted to take the nuggets of useful information and put them in one course, because homeopaths are really busy people. They've chosen to be homeopaths. That's where their focus is. And so the courses that were out there for them in astrology were either cookie cutter, not in depth in any way, like really superficial courses about sun sign astrology, which don't serve anybody. Or you had to go do a full diploma course, which is really expensive and time. Look, who has time to do that? So what I did, and I worked really hard to distill really important, practical, useful things through the lens of homeopathic language. And I've created a course. It's an 8-week course purely for homeopaths. I'm going in knowing that everybody on my course is going to know the language. I can talk about elements, I can talk about retrogradation, I can use rubrics, knowing that we're already, like my audience is already at a super good level. And so I'm going to cover what you'd be doing in a very long astrology course in literally 8 weeks. You'll come out, you'll be able to look at a chart of yourself, client, friends, family, and it's going to help you ask better questions. It's going to help you unlock stuck bits in your clients' cases. That's what I really want you to do. And another massive thing is we all get affected by the current energy in the sky, particularly the big outer planets that take a year, 2 years to go over part of your chart. They will be profound times of change in someone's life. If you're treating somebody and your clients going through that and their remedies stop working, how many times as practitioners have we thought, it's me, I'm not good enough, my remedies aren't good enough? And for fear, we've walked away from that case or we've overprescribed. If we simply knew this is a time that client really should go see an astrologer and understand what the astrological energy is doing, then that also is hugely empowering for us, isn't it? To know it isn't me, it isn't my remedies, they're just going through a massive Neptune transit. So I'm going to cover that as well, cover kind of the red flag things, because actually looking back, I did that. Looking back, I can definitely see times when in my own life I had really big transits and remedies just weren't holding.
It actually sounds like should be an essential part of every homeopath's training, like when you put it that way. Because also I know, and that's something that Gabriel Blast that I've had on has spoken about, is that sometimes it can be so hard to get into some cases, like to really get to the nitty gritty of what it is that needs to be treated in a case. And that's where the natal chart can give you some clues and can open up conversations. But that's so essential what you're saying now with one, being able to get a person to take a remedy at the time where the moon is that's going to be best for them, but also when they've got these big planets going over, realizing that might be what's going on and being able to just encourage them. Like for me, it felt like, when did I see you? Like a couple of months ago now, I think.
Yeah.
But just knowing when you said this planet is going to be over by mid-November, but definitely early next year, they're all gone, but they're going to start passing you by mid-November.
That was Pluto.
Yeah, and just knowing that there's like a glimmer of light, like it just made me feel like, okay, it's not going to go on forever. It's been like 4 years, just like hold on, just like a little bit longer, which was really nice. And yeah, it made a big difference. So it feels almost like it should be an essential part of our homeopathic practice.
I mean, as much as I would love that, I think what's interesting is I get to talk to a lot of people. Obviously, most of my clients are holistic practitioners, not just homeopaths. But what I'm seeing, which is really exciting, is that people are blending modalities. They're doing what works for them, whether it's they're using kinesiology. I've listened to some of your other podcasts and really going into like the biochemical testing, which I think is fascinating, or
that's my thing at the moment
with the biome. And I think what we're understanding is that we're homeopaths at our core, and we can take what resonates with us to elevate our practice. And for anybody listening who thinks that, oh, actually, I'm really enjoying this language, then that would be a great add-on. And what I've made sure is that in 8 weeks, I've literally condensed. Every week we will be taking away practical nuggets that you can take there and then into your practice. That's what I really wanted to put at the key of what I was doing. And then I'll do, if for the people that want to go deeper, I will do some other workshops and courses on specific things, but the 8 weeks will be enough for most people.
If your course is anything to go, if the way that you present information is anything to go by, this course is going to be epic, because like I said, that's the thing that I valued the most of that consult with you, is you took the time to explain things in language that made it so easy to understand. And literally, I couldn't understand why I had never understood my natal chart before. Like, you explained it in such an easy way. So I really think you have a gift. You really have a gift. I'm sure it says it somewhere on your chart that you have a way of making complicated information very easy.
Yeah, it's where my voice is. My voice is speaking a very beautiful, nuanced language. And I think that's what I love, is that astrology, doing your job, you know, astrology is a language. And if you understand that language, the sky speaks to you.
Only problem is now we have to wait till March for this course, right?
Yeah. You do. You do. You do.
And I'm sure you astrologically worked that out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm also I'm also a perfectionist because of all my Virgo, and I want this to be really good. And so there's going to be pre-recorded lectures that I'm working on at the moment, and edited bite-sized chunks, so people can dip in and out, rewatch them, go back, earmark them. And then every week we're going to have a live Q&A. I'm going to limit numbers because I want those live Q&As to dive into people's charts and do real life examples with people. And so it's going to be a really interactive and immersive course, learning through our own charts. And then I'm going to learn. I really want people's feedback on the first course, but then I'm going to keep running it again and again, because I want to have limited numbers so that people have got a chance to really ask about their own questions. So even if you've had your chart done before, it's different. I've had my chart read many times, and you learn very differently when you learn your chart as a student, because you drill down on one planet and you go, oh, I'd never really thought about my Mercury in isolation. So that's actually quite a cool exercise to do. And yes, it starts March next year, because that's really good in my own chart. And I'm working on making it the very best course that I can between now and then. And in February, I'm doing a teaching weekend for the Irish School on astrology and tissue salts.
Wow.
That's on their website as well. So I won't be going into as much depth about all of the planets. I'll be focusing mainly on the sun and the moon and the ascendant, but we'll be looking very much at medical astrology and the tissue salt. So I'm making sure that you could do both, and they're not going to duplicate.
Oh, wow. Amazing. And most important question, where do we sign up? And please keep me a spot.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So my website is called Jupiter Rising, because I actually have Jupiter on my ascendant. So I didn't make that up. I do genuinely have Jupiter rising in my own birth chart. But my name is Liz Norman. So if you literally Google Liz Norman astrology, the SEO is really good, and I will come up at the top of the list. And if you go on my website, you can book a consult, and I've got a courses tab, and you can click on that and sign up for the course. And as I do other courses, I'll add those onto there. I've got an Instagram as well. Again, Liz Norman Astrology, nice and easy to find.
Yes, I've been following you on Instagram. It's great you share little bits of useful nuggets in there. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Liz, is there anything else that you want to make sure our listeners know, or that we still need to share? I mean, there's so much more that we can cover, but is there anything else that you want to share?
Really important. You know, I actually, more than anything, it's really cool that you've allowed me to showcase what I'm doing. I just want to help people and share what I'm passionate about. So I really would say to people, you are more than your sun sign. Go look at your chart on a free app somewhere. Look at your sun, look at your moon. And also, if you did have that accurate time of birth, look at what they call the ascendant or the rising sign. Those three become what we call the big three. So just start investigating those three signs in a little bit more detail, because they're going to nuance and make it much more individual how you understand yourself. So everybody can go do that and read online a bit more about those, because then you're going to get a handle on understanding yourself a little bit better. And so that's the number one. Number two, start following the moon. Just start following the moon through the sky. Start noticing your energy with the moon, and you'll be really surprised how you can actually do almost a homeopathic proving of a sign by going, for example, when the moon is Virgo, is very organized and planny and likes everything just so. If you find yourself like a couple of days going through your house manically cleaning, and you go look, you go, oh look, the moon's in Virgo. So almost reverse engineer it, say, how am I feeling? Then go look and see what sign the moon is in. And you're going to start learning astrological signs as if you were doing a proving of them, which is a very cool way of learning.
Oh, I love how you relate that back to homeopathy. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's, yeah. And anybody can do that. And that's completely free.
Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate it. I think your course is going to be kick-ass, and I cannot wait to check it out. Thank you so much for today.
That's all right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.